Hello everyone. Before I start, I actually am recording this after the chemistry planning one, and there's construction going outside as always. So if you hear that noise, sorry, I apologize. I cannot avoid the noise. Um, but I hope my voice is loud enough for the noise. Yeah. So let's start. This is the first episode of the GP strategy series, and this episode will be covering the studying methods before the exam. I hope this doesn't get too long. If it does, maybe I'll see how it goes. Yeah. So so in this episode I will be telling you more about how much to study and how to study GP before the exam, and also include some aspects of my own experience studying GP along the way. So, um, yeah. So now let me just start. So the first thing I will tell you or I'll talk to you about is classwork, because before you even study or anything, you first need to go to class and do stuff in class. And of course, in my JC, we didn't have lectures. We had only tutorials for GP, which is probably maybe a good thing, because I don't think you really want to be listening to someone drone out, drone out, wait, drone for a long time about stuff. So yeah, so in class we would depending on your GP teacher, you would get some homework, and the homework would be quite different based on the teacher, and it would be either reading something or doing one of the those essay plans or something like that. So, and on classwork, my opinion is do all your classwork whether you like it or not. Of course, the optional ones maybe you may not need to do, but the one that this the teacher specifically tells you to prepare before you come to class or things like that, please do it. Don't skimp on your classwork, because and this is applicable to all subjects, because honestly for me, classwork is most of my studying. I don't study that much outside the class. I just do my homework, I do my tutorials for everything. And believe me, it saves you a lot of your time. You don't need to restudy stuff, or you don't need to like think extra later on in terms of that kind of stuff. So I'll tell you more about this later, down the road. And but now I'm gonna tell you about what you do on your own. And for me personally, I don't really study GP that much. And my best subject is maths, and that one I don't really study that much either, because I need to spend time studying history or physics or something. And the thing is, the amount of time I spend studying GP is about the same amount or even less than the amount of time I spend on maths, because it's not because I thought I was particularly good at GP or anything. It's not because of that, but because I didn't really like studying GP. I don't really like sitting down and writing I tend to hesitate to start writing an essay, or I don't really know how to go about properly studying GP for that matter. But the thing is, if for example I'm doing some homework or something, and as I just said, I tend to hesitate to start doing it. But once I do start doing a essay plan or something like that, I tend to get quite involved into it. I quite enjoy doing that actually. Even though I hesitate to start, I enjoy essay plans for some reason. I mean, I enjoy learning more about a certain topic. And I think that's a good thing at the very least. But so what did I actually do? I only really studied GP nearer the exam. I don't study beforehand, like even before that. So what I actually do is I read the newspaper every day. And I actually still read the newspaper because I'm subscribed to the Straits Times physical newspaper. In fact, I will just bring the newspaper to morning assembly. Like I come a bit early, so I just sit there on the parade square and read newspaper there. And nowadays I just do that at home because I have nothing to do. I don't have anywhere to go. It's sad. Okay. But now I just skim over the articles and like just skim over the titles just to and only read some articles which I actually want to read. So yeah, it is important to read the newspaper. It is quite helpful actually. Um, and if you don't like Straits Times, there's a lot of other places where you can get news from. Uh, Now I'm just gonna tell a few. So Straits Times obviously for Singapore news. You can also use Channel News Asia or yeah, that Channel News Asia will have more news like that you can access freely, I think. Um, and here's one that I don't think everyone would have heard of, which is France 24. And the only reason why I tell this is because I was in H1 French in 2017 and I went to France 24 to listen to stuff in French. Don't ask me why. um, but I found out that actually that website has a lot of African news as well, which if you're interested in things that are happening in Africa and you don't see that written in Straits Times that often, you can actually refer to France 24 and see if maybe you can find some interesting news there. And also they have a lot of little, mini documentary things and stuff like that. And if you are learning French at the same time, you can use it for that, I guess. It's helpful, I guess. And I think most of the news is quite free. You can also see them in YouTube and stuff like that. So, okay, apart from that, we have Atlantic. Of course, Atlantic, you may not be able to see all the news, but they are more useful for opinion pieces, in my opinion. They have really nice, long opinion pieces. If you like reading that kind of thing, you can read that. And another place where you can go for opinions is Guardian. I think Guardian has some nice opinion pieces too. Apart from that, you can if you don't like reading, you can watch a video. You can go to YouTube. There are some places where you can get news on many different topics, and the news channels themselves have channels in YouTube, like France 24 does, and a lot of other French newspapers have channels there. Oh well. So which one do I actually read? Most of the time it's just Straits Times. I don't actually spend that much time reading other newspapers. I also don't read The Economist. I don't read Times Magazine. I don't do any of that stuff. So uh, I'm like on the lax end of people studying for GP. And on TED Talks, I think if you find them useful, you can watch it. You can watch them, and maybe I should have probably tried to watch more TED Talks, but I only watch them now, more so than I was when I was in JC, because in JC after a day of studying, I don't feel like watching even more educational stuff. I just end up watching something funny. Um, yeah, so apart from that, from reading stuff and all that is one thing, and the other way of studying is maybe getting some GP books and doing them or reading them. So actually I did buy some GP books, but honestly the only one that I actually referred to properly was the A-level one, and I didn't even write in it because a bunch of the year's papers were given to me by my teacher beforehand. So I just wrote it on a separate piece of paper or just looked at it, I guess. So my opinion, do not buy the books unless you want a very specific skill set or something like that. Like if for example you have a hard time actually actively searching for examples, some of the books might have good examples, and if you want some model essays, maybe they might be helpful. But the thing is, you won't really have a lot of time. Just face it. You already had to study for, 3 H2 subjects and 1 H1 or 4 H2 subjects, depending on what course, like what combination you're taking. and you already need to spend a lot of time studying all those subjects. And for GP, I feel you won't really have as much time to study for GP. And I'll talk more about this later. So yeah. Um, okay, so my my comment. Okay, so some of my classmates are actually more sian than me. So I mean, to begin with, I'm not even sian when I come to doing GP. I only study near the exams. I just read newspaper instead. So some of my classmates were actually really good, and they had like a actual book where they write examples and things like that, and that is quite enviable in fact. And of course, some of them actually got A's all the time for GP. So maybe it might be a good method. But if you really cannot do that, if you're a messy person like me, and don't see the point in doing it, then you don't do it. I mean, my opinion is to spend your effort studying your other subjects, like what I was about to talk about. So the thing is, GP is like what, 3 hours worth of papers on one day. But for example, your science, you had to do 4 papers. If you were doing H2, and 3 papers, maybe if you had to do 3 papers, I don't know. You had to do a bunch of papers at least if you're doing H1 or H2 basically. And even for math, you had to do 2 3 hour papers if you're doing a H2 math. And for H1, I think it's a bit lesser. Is it? I don't know. And even for human subjects like history, for example, you need to do 2 3 hour papers, and that was the hardest thing. Yeah. So the thing is, if you think about it logically, your GP, the amount of time you spend on doing a GP papers is going to be very little compared to the amount of time you spend doing all of your other subject papers. So because of that, I recommend not spending too much time on this H1 subject when, if you really need to work on your other H2 subjects. This is my opinion. And especially if you're actually pretty good already, you do not need to spend too much time on GP, like honestly. And as I said in the introduction, GP is probably more about strategies than about studying. So the fact that I'm actually talking about, so this is actually a strategy. Don't spend too much time studying for GP. So now I will talk about another thing that people like to talk about, which is topically studying. Because of course many people will give this advice that, oh, you can choose 3 topics and just study those 3 topics well, and you just do the questions that are in those topics in your exams, and you should be okay, right? So uh let me just say wrong. I mean, I have also given this advice to focus on certain topics, but I have a nuance to it, which is that those topics can be your niche, but you must still read quite widely. You must still know about a lot of topics, because honestly, there will be certain times when during the exam you cannot do that question. Even if you know about the topic, you just cannot do that question. And I will talk about that in the next episode. But for now, just take my word for it. You should try to, you can have your niche in, for example, science, but you must make sure to know about a lot of other things as well, and not just focus on one topic. Of course, they said 3 topics usually. I think that's probably a better idea than one topic. So you can choose to focus on 3 topics, but do it at your own risk. You must still read widely, read the newspaper. You will never know when you need it. And honestly, it doesn't even have to be stuff that you don't usually read or something. You can also just follow up on things you already care about. Like, for example, if you like anime, you can, find out more about the history, or, the users of anime today. Like, for example, or actually, there was this thing that I remember, which actually came from France 24. Someone made a comic about this Pakistani girl as a hero, and yeah, you should probably search it up. I don't remember everything, but yeah, this is an interesting example actually. And it shows that anyone can, you can make heroes even using, girls who are young as well. They don't have to be stereotypically American. So yeah, just like that, you can learn about anything you want. You can read up on things that you like, and I just can't wait to tell you about this one topic that is very close to my heart, which and I'll talk about it in the next episode for sure. Yeah, so the thing is, if whatever you like, for example, science or anime or literature or anything, just if you like reading up about it, just do it. It will help you someday. And for me personally, I like to watch Sky Show, and I might know some of the Sky Show news and things like that. And I also like to watch all those educational stuff, and I tend to know all those weird information about random things. And I have used that. I may have used some of this information in my essay, or maybe not, because there are some times where you don't use any of the information you read recently, and you use some completely different information in your essay. So honestly, just you don't have to think about it too clinically and choose only topics that you don't really like or something. You can choose to read up on things that you already care about, and that will make your studying a bit less annoying, I guess, a bit less sad. um, yeah, and the final thing is about vocabulary. Some people wonder, okay, I was bad at English in secondary school. I sucked at stuff like that, that kind of thing, and then they wonder whether they can fare well in GP. Well, let me tell you about myself. I wasn't that great about in English as a subject in RGS, and of course, I mean RGS tends to give you pretty good grades anyway. So so yeah, but my English wasn't great compared to my other subjects actually. I may be good at speaking, but I mean I'm not really good at that, at doing the argumentative essays in English back in RGS. So I was really scared for GP, and then I realized I'm not that bad at GP after all. So yeah, it's not, you don't have to worry about it, I think. Um, and in terms of vocab, my own level of vocabulary is in GP. I don't really use weird words all the time because I think in a simplistic way. I like to explain my things in a simplistic way for the most part, and only use words like big words when I feel that they actually make sense in my explanation, that they help give it some sense of influence, the sense of purpose to the argument. So so technically, yeah, and let me tell you one thing, I suck at literature and I don't understand poems, but I do know some weird words, like for example, I think I told you one example in my introduction. I know words like idiosyncratic from P6 onwards, and I know stuff like cognizant and things like that. I think you should know those words too, but my I would suggest not trying to learn super niche words that no one knows. Don't bother learning words that would make even the teacher search for a dictionary. That's not worth your time. You should focus on other things, which, and by other things is you should focus on, you know I will tell you more about that after some time. Um so when you're if you weren't good at English as a subject, don't worry too much about it. I think you can still do your GP decently well if, for example, you follow the techniques that you use for your mother tongue. For example, if you're good at your mother tongue argumentative essays, then use the techniques in that for GP. For example, one thing that I used to do is to like write the point, and then I keep asking myself, so how do I explain this point further, and so what I think teachers tell you this as well. And actually that technique was taught to me in English class, but I used it more in my mother tongue essays. I do not know why. Yeah, that's quite useful. This technique is useful in many places. So it is actually worth remembering it. It is one of the easiest way to make your argument more complete. So yeah, I guess the reason why I like argumentative essays is because you don't need to know super great vocabulary or fancy expressions to do it. So even though I'm a creative person and like stories, at the same time I don't score well in them because of the vocab. So yeah, actually for GP you do not need to know super great vocabulary. You just need to know enough to sound coherent. Yeah. Yeah, that's the point of GP is to be coherent, very coherent. Um okay, so now let me come back to classwork. So if your teachers are really good teachers, then please do the homework. It helps you to be disciplined. It actually helps you practice your GP skills because you may not really be able to do that on your own. For example, finding certain topics to do or discussing with other people and things like that. It's quite hard to do it on your own. Especially if you remember PW, it takes many people to come up with many different ideas. Even on the same thing, you would need like 4 people to come up with all a full comprehensive list of ideas that help you to um, explain the thing properly and not have any loopholes or cracks in the wall for that matter. Yeah, so that's about classwork. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, wait, what did I mention? Never mind, about the for GP, right? If you think you lack the skills, like you do not know why you're not doing well, I will talk about that more in the video on after the exam, which will help you find your weaknesses and rectify them. But technically, if you already know that you lack a certain skill, you can work on that one skill more. Like, I don't think it will be vocabulary though. It will be mostly being coherent or making effective argument or things like that kind of stuff. But if you do not know yet whether you have a weakness in GP, let me just tell you one way to find out. If you when you're talking to someone, maybe during PW mostly, that's the easiest place to find out. If you're able to convince your friends or anyone else when you talk, they're very convinced when you talk, then I think you probably have the skills to do well in GP. I think I think this is actually actually a skill that can be used in GP. Even if you don't use examples and they're still convinced, then you're good. You're actually pretty good. And if you add some examples, your arguments will be even more convincing. But yeah, we'll talk more about the other skills in the video about after exam, which will talk more about the weaknesses that you may have found after writing a paper and getting it back from your teachers, and then rectifying these mistakes. My throat is getting hoarse. I need water. Yeah, so I'm going to end this soon. If you have any questions, you can leave it down in the comments, and I will cover this in the Q&A video at the very end of the series. And you can also contact me at my Reddit username alkaline hydroxide with a small a. Also, please share the link with your friends. Don't be greedy, okay? Because I think this can be quite useful for many people. So if, for example, a lot of people have this particular question that they need answer, I can actually answer that question. And if you found this really useful, please press the like button and yeah, subscribe because you want to know more. I have told at certain points I have referred that I'll only uncover it in the next episode, so you should be waiting for it. I think they will come next week. Sorry, not yeah, next week. Thank you. Bye.